I want you to imagine something with me this morning. I want you to try to picture Jesus coming down the road from the village of Bethany outside Jerusalem, just after he raises his friend Lazarus from the dead. And he's coming down the road, and they get him a donkey to ride, and he's entering Jerusalem just a week before his death. And the road is lined with thousands of people who are shouting, "Hosanna to the Son of David! Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." And people are laying their cloaks in the road, and they're cutting palm branches off the trees and laying them in the road because they in this moment, they're understanding that Jesus is their messianic king, and they're making the carpet of a king for him to ride into Jerusalem. And the road is lined with thousands of people who are shouting, "Hosanna, Hosanna." And he enters the temple and he drives out. He drives out the merchants, and he drives out the money changers, and he begins to flip over the tables of the money changers. And by the way, what that was about, it wasn't, I've heard people say that's why you're not supposed to have bake sales in church, right? So what that was about was that they had taken the only area of the temple where a non-Jew was allowed to come worship, what they called the court of the Gentiles. And they had said, "We don't care if the Gentiles can come. We don't care about those people. They're dogs." And so they had converted it into the currency exchange and the place where you could buy your doves and little animals for sacrifice as a Jew. They said, these Gentiles don't need a space to draw near to God. And so when Jesus is flipping over the tables and chasing everybody out of there, he's quoting a passage from the Old Testament that says this, "My house shall be called a house of prayer for all nations." Jesus is saying, you don't get to drive everybody away. You may have been chosen in some ways, but you don't get to drive it. So he comes in, he clears out the temple and all of this. And then the blind and the lame, right? Because all these people have followed Jesus. This is like a huge crowd. And it says, Matthew says, the blind and the lame came to him in the temple. And so right there in the temple, Jesus does his most public and least hidden healings in front of this mixed and massive crowd. You know how Jesus was always saying to people like, "I'm going to heal you, but don't make too big a deal of it. Don't tell a lot of people. He was trying to keep everything from this is the end of the journey and everything's going to get big. And so Jesus is just in public and he does it. The blind and the lame come to him and he heals them as if to say to that crowd, "I don't care if you're for me or against me, but God is in your midst." And then, and for some reason, this is for me the most powerful or moving part of the story, is the chief priests who run the temple and the scribes who are the ones who tell everybody how to practice the Jewish law exactly, right? They're the ones who tell you better do it just like this. The chief priests and the scribes come to Jesus, and Matthew tells us what they're flipped out about. They're flipped out about the fact that the children are dancing around and saying, "Hosanna to the Son of David! Hosanna to the Son of David!" And they come to Jesus, and this is what they say. "Do you hear what these children are saying?" And Jesus is like, "Yes." I mean, they are flipped out. You cannot let these kids be saying this. And you can't let them act this way in the temple. "Do you hear what these children?" Jesus says, "Yes." And then Jesus quotes this passage from the Old Testament that says, he says to the experts in the Old Testament, "Have you not read where it says, 'From the lips of infants and children, I have ordained praise'?" This story of Jesus bringing life, right? Healing people, children dancing around, making a space for everybody, right? This story, as with so much that's in the Gospels, feels much like where we are today in modern Christianity, where we have exacting religion pitted against the healing of human beings and the wonder of human life. The priests and the scribes, they don't care if people get healed or not, right? And they can't smile on the joy of those children. Why? Because exacting religion is at stake. And if you don't get that perfect, if you don't keep the law perfect, if you're not a perfect Jew, or today we might say, if you don't do all the Christian stuff just the right way that we've talked about, well then God's going to be mad, or God's not going to bless you, or I don't know, something. And that's one of the big reasons that people are losing interest in Christianity in this moment in Western culture, because so many Christians are more interested in judging people and fighting a culture war than they are in loving people and bringing healing to people and seeing people find not merely religion, but in this relationship with God, fullness of life. And really, I think what you're going to see across the decades ahead is essentially, I hate to even say it this way, two groups of Christians. I think you're going to see those Christians who are re-entrenching in everything that they have already thought about the gospel, about politics, about what God is like, about women, about gay people, about race, about all these things. And then you're going to have others of us who think that there may be some things that we need to think more deeply about. That we may need to have the humility to say, maybe we haven't across the decades gotten everything perfect, and we need to rethink some things because we suspect that we have drifted from some things that are near to the heart of God, the way the heart of God is revealed in Jesus. One of the blessings in this church is that there are quite a lot of people who for quite a few years have had that willingness to think together and to rethink some things together. And I have to tell you a story, and I may be telling tales out of school, as they say, so bear with me. But these two approaches of the Christian who re-entrenches and says, I won't change, I'm sure I'm right about everything, and I won't change my mind on anything, and the Christian who says, well, we have to always have some humility and be willing to rethink some things. Those two approaches were illustrated for me at our village board meeting the other night. As people in the hall were getting up and making public comment for and against the village passing a ceasefire resolution related to the war in Gaza. And, you know, villages all around the country are doing this as a way of kind of putting pressure on the levels of government above them. Well, really for two reasons. To say to the Muslims, Arabs, Palestinians in their own community, hey, we stand with you. We know that we stand with you. We know that your people are suffering. But also to say to higher levels of government, like, hey, you have to take a balanced approach to this. You have to consider everybody in the equation, in the decisions that you're making about weapons and about humanitarian aid and all these kind of things. So the village of Plainfield, a group of people, and I've been a little connected to that group, kind of on the edge of it, have been asking the village to pass a resolution that was written here locally and whatnot. And on Monday night, all the people who spoke in opposition to the ceasefire resolution were very vocal Christians. And their reasons for opposing the ceasefire resolution included the long-held Christian idea that for a Christian, allegiance to Israel kind of trumps everything else. That may not make sense to you, but if you know anything about kind of modern Christian eschatology and whatever, there's kind of this thing that like Israel has a special place in God's heart, and so anybody who has a tangle with Israel, you're always 100%, not 90-10, not 60-40, it's 100% Israel, everybody else is kind of bad. So there was a lot of that belief being expressed, and then there was, and then the belief that all Muslims want to kill all non-Muslims. But I have Muslim friends now, and I'm still alive. And they would laugh if they heard me say that. And also these folks who got up and spoke, their Christian nationalism, it sees America as a place owned by Christians, and therefore the Christians are letting everybody else live here, people of other religions and people of other ethnicities, by their good graces. Now, I'm not reading into what they said. This is what was verbalized, and more starkly than I have said it to you. And then, of course, there were some of us as Christians who got up and said, well, let's dial that back a little bit. But the really interesting moment, though, and this goes to the point of always being willing to step back and try to see what we think, and to be willing to re-examine some of what we think. The really interesting moment came after one woman spoke expressing these views that I've just described to you. And she had apparently commented publicly before at these meetings. I was at one of these meetings a month and a half ago, and then I missed a bunch of meetings, and then I was at this one. But she had apparently commented publicly before. And after she spoke, after she was done speaking, our mayor, who is a friend of mine and is a Christian, our mayor asked her not to step away from the podium quite so quickly. And he said to her, I'm not sure some of the things that you said here were said in the best spirit. This is a hall filled with probably 2/3 Palestinian and Muslim people, right? Right here in our village board hall. He says, I'm not sure that some of the things you've said were in the best spirit. And he said, he said to her, he said, when I look around our community and when I look around America, I don't see brown people and black people and white people and Christians and Muslims and Jews. I see human beings. And now keep in mind, the mayor and the board, they don't say anything for public comment. They don't nod, they don't clap, they don't frown, they just let people speak. But our mayor, John, spoke. And he said, this is what I see when I look around. And he said, I've been reading your Facebook posts since you last spoke here. And I'm like, and he says, I wonder if you could clarify something you said at the end of a long post after the last time you spoke here. At the end of the post, you wrote on Facebook, wake up, white people. And I was like, and I'm thinking here's what I was thinking to myself. I was thinking to myself, that slogan that we have on one of our new LifeSpring t-shirts, I was thinking like, we called Jesus about this. And he suggested that you rethink some things. And it is, I'm being goofy and fun, but I'm not here to talk about issues this morning. But I think there's something that we have to get straight, which is that Jesus stepped into a culture with a massive emphasis on rigid and exacting religion, where a lot of leaders were sure they had everything right, where the very religious people were policing everyone else and telling them everything that they needed to do to stay out from under the judgment of God. And Jesus essentially said to people, your religion has caused you to lose track of the goodness of God, of what you yourselves really are, and of what it means to be a human being. They wanted to talk about religious rules. What does Jesus say? Jesus says, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of the heavens. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are the meek. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for everything to be right. Blessed are those with good motives. That's what it means, pure in heart, right? Blessed are the merciful. Blessed are the peacemakers. They made everyone feel small. Jesus stood that same day, from what I'm quoting, the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus stood on the hillside, looked at the crowd, and he said, you're the light of the world. They said God was ready to judge at every turn. Jesus said, don't you know how good God is? That if you ask him for a fish, he won't give you a snake? That he's so gracious that he makes his sun to rise on the evil people and the good people, and he makes his rain fall on the just people and the unjust people? He's not actually distinguishing between them as he passes out his gifts. That's what Jesus was saying. So I want to tell you this morning, I'm relieved at this point in my Christianity as we're wrangling with what's at the heart of Christianity in Western culture in this moment. I'm relieved, if I can say it that way, to encounter Jesus in the Gospels, inviting the children to come to him, eating with people in their homes, letting people spill out their tears, the tears of their broken lives in his presence, weeping at the grave of his friend, hanging out with all the people that the religious crowd disdained. Because you know what all those things are? Human life. That's what Jesus stepped into. And he didn't push back from it and say, there's this pile of religion over here you really need. Jesus stepped into it and he engaged people's humanity. And one of the reasons I'm still a Christian, right? That's what this series is about. One of the reasons I'm still a Christian is because my eyes are fixed more on this Jesus I see in the Gospels, who cares so deeply about human beings. You know that verse I love, right? Some of you have heard me say this before. When Jesus shares that last supper that last meal with his friends, and then they have that long evening of conversation. And then just before they go out to the Garden of Gethsemane, where Jesus will be arrested and the whole ordeal will start, John simply says this as they prepare to leave the house. And having loved his own who were in the world, Jesus now loved them to the end. Man, that's human. That's seeing people. John is saying he was 100% for these guys, and he was going to be for them all the way until they nailed him to that cross. God made us. He thought us up, this whole thing. Jesus knew that to be human was a thing. It was a think of what your life has been. It was a big experience. One of the great ironies of religion is how it actually often sucks the humanity out of people. It gives them this idea that what they're supposed to be has to do with doctrines and rules and religious practices, turning them into kind of little automatons. But to be human is a wondrous thing. It's a crazy thing. Anybody agree? But it's a wondrous thing. Do you know when I feel myself feeling the wonder of being human? I feel it when I can't find words for the beauty of a sunset. I feel it when I look in my grandchildren's eyes. I feel it when I hear these little LifeSpring children running around here giggling in the hallways in the cafe. I feel it when I feel the unexplainable love of my wife. Last night I watched my friends beaming and tearing up, those of you who know Larry and Diane, at the wedding of their son, and I felt it. I feel it when I sit with a friend who's brokenhearted, or when I feel brokenhearted. I feel it when I ache for a friend who has just lost someone they love. I feel it when I finish a project and feel the satisfaction of a job well done. I feel it when I can feel the constancy of friends who have stayed with me through thick and thin. And conversely, when I sometimes feel the sorrow of friends who have gone away. I feel it when I sit at a table and hear the stories of brand new friends. And all those moments, all those experiences are the mystery of being human. And God is to be found right in the middle of them. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? God is not the religious package off on the side of the life you're living. He's in the middle of the whole thing. Our ability to experience all these human things I'm trying to describe, to feel them deeply, to choose between an open or a closed heart, to learn what love is and figure out whether we want to do it or not. This is exactly what it means to be made in the image of God. To experience all of the humanity of this human life and then have God say to us, would you like me to be in that journey with you? But life beats it out of us, and then religion sucks it out of us, and life can end up feeling dangerous or fearful or despairing or meaningless. And Jesus comes and he loves us, and he refuses to get trapped by all these things. And he tells us a different story about who we are and about what this thing we're doing here is, as if to say to us, wake up, come alive, come alive. One of the reasons I'm still a Christian is because this is the mystery of being human, and the glory of God is just all tangled up in it. Somebody's got to say amen or something. I don't know. Okay, all right. But that's one part of the mystery. The other part is the mystery of the gospel, the mystery of the good news that is the specific way God is restoring everything that is broken. And for that, I want to take you for a minute into one of the Apostle Paul's letters in 1 Corinthians chapter 2. In writing to these friends in Corinth, Paul is reminding them of the message that he preached when he first came to their city. And what he tells them is, when I first came to your city, I want you to remember that I didn't come and try to speak in all these eloquent ways that would convince you of some lofty philosophical idea. Like, I didn't try to come and impress you with language and philosophy and all these things. He tells them my message was really quite simple. And he uses this word wisdom, sophos in Greek. Philosophos, philosophy, the love of wisdom. He uses this word sophos, and he says, I didn't come with all this eloquent wisdom. But then he says, it's not that we don't speak a message of wisdom. He says, we do speak a message of wisdom. And for these Greek people, they were all about philosophy. Greece has always been the kind of center of, or in ancient times, was the center of human philosophy, human philosophical study and speculation. So sophos was a big thing. Wisdom was a big thing to these people. So Paul says, it's not that we don't have anything to say about wisdom. He says, no, we speak a message of wisdom, but then he says it to them this way. We speak the wisdom of God in a mystery, a wisdom that for ages was hidden, lost to us, but which was intended to bring about our glory since before all time. What is he talking about? He says to these Corinthians, we speak the wisdom of God in a mystery. Well, a few verses earlier, he described how the wisdom of God is revealed specifically at the cross, which on the surface looks weak and foolish. After all, he got himself killed. Nobody on the day Jesus was crucified walked by the cross, pointed up at Jesus and said, that's just the wisest and strongest thing I've ever seen. It's a dead criminal. Got caught, got killed. But Paul says that the cross on the surface looks foolish and weak, but it turns out to be the greatest display of wisdom and power ever. This is what he says. Jews are looking for a miracle, and Greeks are looking for sophos, for wisdom. But we preach Christ crucified. And then he says this, Christ, who is the power of God and the wisdom of God, because what looks like the foolishness of God is wiser than what human beings know. And what looks like the weakness of God is more powerful than the ways human beings exercise power. That's why Paul says we speak the wisdom of God in a mystery. This is something, he's not saying God's been hiding it. He's saying it's been lost to human beings. People don't get it. Because you see, we're all down here trying to get what we want by dominating each other, by using the power of coercion with each other, by defending ourselves and claiming all our rights to hurt other people in defense of ourselves. By making ourselves feel bigger by seeing and treating others as smaller. That's really what all this othering in human society is about, right? I make myself bigger by saying that group's bad, that group's less, that group shouldn't be here. But he comes down and instead he loves us. And he does it all the way to the cross. And what it does is it exposes all the ways we think are so powerful for the sham that they really are. It exposes all our false strength. It exposes the way we're using strength and power with each other. This is what Paul means in Colossians when he says that hanging there naked on the cross, he says the reality is that Jesus was stripping the powers and authorities naked and exposing their ways. How? By love. You think beating people down? You think making people small? You think pulling out the war machine, killing people is strong? No, I'm going to tell you what's strong. What's strong is love. And of course, it turns out, and it's not Easter, but this is the Easter message. It turns out you can't kill love. We tried. I know people are disillusioned because there's just so much crappy stuff out there wearing the name of Christianity these days, but don't let that tempt you to walk away from what C.S. Lewis called the deeper magic. Because it's this beautiful mystery of the God who showed up among us not with more commands and rules and a big stick, but with the wisdom and strength of love, which we had lost track of. And in the craziest move a God could ever make, he got down and he washed our feet. And he washed our feet even as we tried to take the life from him. The cross is so crazy to me. It is simultaneously the greatest act of love and the greatest exposure of all the wrong things we have thought and all the wrong ways we have lived with each other. I spent my whole early life trying to make myself strong. You know, I wanted to be that. You've heard those stories. I wanted to be a tough guy when I was a teenager because of things I'd gone through. And then in my 20s, when I got a hold of the Bible, I said, oh man, I could be strong with this on some people, let me tell you. I didn't understand it psychologically, right? But I was. My whole early life, my teens, my 20s, my 30s. I'm trying to make myself strong. But I want to tell you this morning, if I have a testimony this morning, it's that I have been undone by the weak and foolish ways of God. By this Jesus, and that's a beautiful mystery, and it has awakened me to the only real strength, which turns out is love. See, Jesus snuck in among us. We were sure we understood how to do life. We were sure what strength looked like. We were sure we were sure what we wanted and how to get it. And by this mystery of love, most poignantly lived out at the cross, he turned it all on its head and opened the mystery to us. I'm still a Christian because of that. That has rescued my mind and my heart from the way it once knew. Do any of you know the Shaker hymn, The Lord of the Dance? No? Somebody? Yes? It just seemed to me like an appropriate way to end this sermon. I danced in the morning when the world was begun, and I danced in the moon and the stars and the sun. And I came down from heaven and I danced on the earth at Bethlehem. I had my birth. I danced for the scribe and the Pharisee, but they would not dance and they wouldn't follow me. I danced for the fishermen, for James and John, and they came with me and the dance went on. I danced on the Sabbath and I cured the lame, and the holy people, they said they thought it was a shame. They whipped and they stripped and they hung me on high, and they left me there on a cross to die. I danced on a Friday when the sky turned black. It's hard to dance with the devil on your back. They buried my body and they thought I'd gone, but I am the dance, and I still go on. They cut me down and I leapt up high. I am the life that'll never, never die. I'll live in you if you'll live in me. I am the Lord of the dance, said he. Dance then, wherever you may be. I am the Lord of the dance, said he, and I'll lead you all, wherever you may be, and I'll lead you all in the dance, said he.